Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to, if you grew up in the 1960s, you remember this, Life in America. And you know how these reactions are at this point, but I still really enjoy these. I've done quite a few at this point, but some have been in like the 50s, some in the 60s, some in the 70s, all different eras. But it's just fascinating to see how different things were. I guess this is what, 60 years ago, but 50 years ago, 40 years ago, just in the past, like how just things were, how life was, differences that people used to like, just what people used to get up to basically. But we're going to check this out and see, hopefully going to enjoy. Links are also in the description to my Patreon if you want to see some movie reactions that I can't post to YouTube. And yeah, I reacted to Back to the Future recently. I'm going to react to a lot of other older classic films, including the trilogy of Back to the Future. I think I'm going to do the reaction to the second Back to the Future film when I'm back from my weekend away with my girlfriend because it's her birthday. But yeah, so that should be out in 3 days time max. But if you're interested in movie reactions, links are there, but I'm talking too much. Let's jump into this and see the 1960s in America.
Those of you who grew up during the 1960s most likely remember it as a simpler time, even through all the chaos that made up much of the decade. The 60s were measured by those quintessential moments of childhood, like playing outside all day during the summer, riding your banana bikes.
Bro, I used to love doing that as well though. What the hell is a banana bike? A banana bike? What the hell is that?
Taking family vacations in the station wagon, and maybe most notably, the fascination with the moon landing.
True. That's 69, 68?
Baseball has never been more exciting than it was in 1961, when Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle were in a race to break Babe Ruth's record.
I've heard this things a good 2-3 times now in different videos. I guess this was the hot era for, well, not the hot era, just the era for crazy good baseball players, I guess. But I've seen this record, or this mentioned so many times about this record. Did they both break it in the end? I think they did, right?
Of 60 home runs in a single season. That all changed on October 1st, when during the last game of the regular season, Maris hit his 61st home run against the Boston Red Sox.
He looks jacked. I also know baseball has a little bit of performance enhancers in the sport. Was this the era? Was that in like the 80s? I mean, it was probably all throughout, to be fair. He looks jacked though.
You might also remember collecting and trading baseball cards during this time, because Topps baseball cards were huge.
Topps made cards in the 60s. I mean, I collected Topps football cards or soccer cards when I was like 6 to like 12, 13, 14. And that's Topps as well. How long are Topps been making cards for or stickers for? What the hell?
For many kids living in the 60s, their first taste of freedom and adventure came on the wheels of a bike. The bike of choice? The Schwinn Stingray. With its high-rise handlebars, the banana bike looked like a
Oh, this is the banana bike.
chopper motorcycle, which instantly made it the coolest ride on the street. Every kid around had this bike on their wish list. Do you remember drinking Tang? The orange powder was poured into water, where it magically became a neon orange drink that tasted super sweet.
This is Kool-Aid before Kool-Aid then? Or was Kool-Aid also a thing in these times too?
It doesn't sound too appetizing, but when astronaut John Glenn was chugging Tang while making his historic first trip around the globe in 1962, every kid knew they had to drink it. With Tang being the drink of the astronauts, the food of the astronauts was called Space Food Sticks. They were a common lunchbox item, and they had a weird, chewy texture that tasted a little bit like peanut butter.
Damn.
What about the family station wagon? Every middle-class family had one.
I mean, I've seen this car in so many films, but I've never seen it in person. So obviously, I mean, I grew up in the 2000s and the 2010s, so it probably makes sense. But I've seen it so many times in films, but never seen it in person. It's just a weird concept to have, but yeah, I mean, and this one too. What's this one called? I've seen this one a lot too.
Do you remember going to the drive-in and sprawling out with your siblings in the back? Then there was the family road trip you would take over the summer. And back then, there were no seatbelt laws.
Sitting
so you
wherever
could
they
actually
want.
lie down in the back on long road trips and color, read, or just lounge around.
Doesn't look that comfortable, I'm not gonna lie.
For those of you who couldn't wait to grow up and become responsible for making your own meals, there was the Easy Bake Oven.
Wait, does this actually cook food? Or is it like a toy?
Kinner released the iconic toy in 1963, complete with recipes to bake your own cookies, cakes, and other confections.
I mean, that's kind of crazy, but also, as a kid, that is pretty cool. Wait, so you could actually use it? That is so fascinating. God damn. It's a little cooker, a little oven for a kid to cook stuff. Damn.
During the 1960s, Jell-O molds were standard on many dinner tables, and a culinary aversion for most kids. On the one hand, they were Jell-O, which was great, but somewhere in that jiggly gelatin, there were things like fruit, marshmallows,
Marshmallow and jelly sounds like it could go hard. I've never had it, but...
nuts, and even vegetables.
Oh. Fruit and marshmallow I can get behind. Nuts, I do like nuts, but in jelly it would just make it all... them all soft. And vegetables, no, I'm good with vegetables, but... the first two, I'm down with that.
Jell-O even introduced savory flavors, like celery, mixed vegetable, and Italian salad.
Oh god, that is vile.
Swanson TV dinners were your mom's favorite last-minute dinner.
These are
Main
good.
dishes included turkey, Salisbury steak, and fried chicken. In the 1960s, the TV dinners even had a compartment for dessert, which was normally a fruit cobbler or brownie.
Is a fruit cobbler like a crumble? I think it is, like an apple crumble. I think that is. It kind of, if it's the top left, that looks like a crumble, but a cobbler or whatever.
Would be scalding hot compared to the main dish.
Where did that go?
If you were a kid in 1964 and your parents owned a television, you saw the Beatles make their American debut on The Ed Sullivan Show. Their arrival was insane, and the response was known as Beatlemania. Their mop-top style haircuts inspired kids to either cut their hair the same way or buy Beatle wigs.
Wait, so was this haircut popular in the US as well? God, they're so scouse, man. Proper Liverpudlians, but... And also, the Beatles, when they first... I guess when he's mentioned how they'd done their first performance, were they known... I don't know if anyone will know this, because I guess a lot of you watching this weren't from this era or didn't... You were too young to remember. Would people have known who the Beatles were before they started doing these live shows in the US, or were they just unknown at this point?
Their ankle-high boots also became all the rage. And then there were the collarless jackets, which inspired many people to wear them as well. Hosted by Dick Clark, American Bandstand was a must-see television show for every kid growing up in the 1960s. Not only did the show help us discover new artists like Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder,
Damn.
Sonny and Cher, and Tina Turner,
Damn.
but it also taught us hot dance crazes like the locomotion, the Watusi, and the mashed potato.
The mashed potato, do the mashed potato. Damn, that's a classic. I mean, I'm not from this era. I don't know anything about this show, but I know some of those dances, and I think I knew 3 of those musicians, just briefly mentioned, so I can almost guarantee this was the biggest show of this era.
During the 1960s, roller skating was big, with some kids still using metal skates that strapped onto their shoes. They certainly weren't very smooth when it came to rolling down the street, and they never fastened quite right, but the adjustments made it possible to never outgrow them.
Damn, that's quite convenient, to be fair. I used to like roller skating when I was a kid, but I just sort of didn't do it when I was older. And I wouldn't be able to do it now, because it's one of those things you sort of have to be able to do, I feel like, when you're younger. Learn it. Because when you're older, it's just harder to learn things in general. But It's probably more, I like this because it's more convenient. You can adjust the sizes and you don't have to wear some big ass skates. You can just wear your shoes with the skates on the bottom.
Sea monkeys, a brand name for brine shrimp, were sold as novelty aquarium pets.
In the
Thanks
60s.
to the genius marketing strategy that involved placing ads in comic books, in which they bore very little resemblance to the real-life crustaceans, they became one of the most in-demand pets of the decade.
These were in demand in the 2000s as well. Sea monkeys from the 60s. I did not realise they would have been going on for that long.
The game that had everyone laughing, and which was usually the centerpiece to every party, was the wildly popular Twister. Other top toys of this era were Hot Wheels, Barbie, and G.I. Joe.
Hot Wheels. Wow, Hot Wheels is from the 60s. Barbie, I guess I could have guessed that maybe. And G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe is probably the one that I'd have assumed would have been from this era out of all of them. But Hot Wheels, damn. Also Twister, I've not played that since I was a kid, but all these things I'm realising were from like 60 plus years ago. It's blowing my mind.
Along with tons of space-related toys, as kids across America dreamt of becoming astronauts.
I wonder how different Hot Wheels look now compared to how they used to.
Trolls.
Trolls are from the 60s! Oh my god, what? Oh, I had these, I didn't know what they were when I was really young. I used to just see these in like the toy cupboard. I was always creeped out by them, but I never knew what the hell it was. But obviously I know what they are, like, since growing up. But they're from the 60s.
Were also everywhere in the 1960s. They became one of the best-selling toys between 1963 and 1965. Danish fisherman and woodcutter Thomas Dam invented the doll in 1959 for his daughter. It became so popular, his company began producing the plastic dolls, calling them Good Luck Trolls. And once they hit the American marketplace in the 1960s, they were everywhere.
Damn. Are they still sold?
The space race was on every kid's mind during the 1960s. We all wanted to grow up and become astronauts. We even watched all the space launches, landings, and re-entries on school televisions. Astronauts were our heroes, and when astronaut Neil Armstrong finally set foot on the moon and said, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," it was like seeing science fiction come to life.
See, I can only imagine, because looking back at that now, it's still mind-blowing. So in these times, I can't even begin to comprehend what that must have been like. I'm always so sad about this. Like, I never really grew up with any sort of space travel. Like, we don't really travel to, I mean, we travel to the edge of space, or the edge of the atmosphere. But there's no, like, moon, like, no one's going anywhere. We've got, like, the rovers and stuff, which is probably making more sense, right? It's safer, no human lives are going to be lost. But just the idea of astronauts landing on the moon or Mars, which I feel like would be a lot harder. It's just something that I wish I grew up with, because it's just a fascination that I think 90% of the world have an interest somewhat in space. I think that's one common interest most humans will have, because it's so unknown. But yeah, in these times, seeing the moon landing must have been crazy. What the fuck?
If you grew up during the
I like this. This was my favourite one so far. There was a lot of things that I've actually seen, which is a surprise. But I enjoyed this one, man. Hopefully you enjoyed this well. I've got a lot of reactions to do, so I'm not going to read the comments today. But hopefully you did enjoy this reaction. Hopefully this was a little throwback for you. Maybe if you're from the 70s or the 80s or from the 50s. Some of these were also in those decades too. I assume a lot of them, like the toys and stuff, definitely would have been in... Well, they've been in all decades. Like Hot Wheels, Barbie are all still some of the biggest toys or most popular toys for kids. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this reaction, and until next time, peace.